The alarm should have gone off 3 seconds ago. I'm staring at line 3, watching the conveyor belt move at speeds that would make my old drill sergeant nervous, and the thermal cutoff that should be screaming warnings is sitting there silent as a church mouse. The bearing temperature on machine 7 is climbing past the red line, and nobody seems to notice except me. I'm Bill Anderson, 51 years old, and I've been keeping this place running for 21 years. Started here in 2002 when I got out of the Marines, and I've seen enough equipment failures to know what's coming next. Trevor, I called out over the machine noise, we need to shut down line 3, now. Trevor Hudson looked up from his tablet, that expensive smile plastered across his face like he was selling insurance. Bill, relax. Everything's running according to the new parameters. We're hitting productivity targets we've never seen before. The bearing temp on machine 7 is at 220 degrees. Manufacturer specs say 180 max. Bill, sometimes you have to push boundaries to achieve breakthrough results. That's when I knew this kid was going to get someone killed. See, Trevor wasn't just any hotshot manager. He was Richard Hudson's nephew, our VP of Operations brother's kid, fresh out of business school with an MBA and opinions about everything. 3 weeks ago, he'd walked into my plant with a clipboard and a plan to revolutionize our efficiency. The plan was my plan. Well, it started as my plan. 4 months back, CEO Charles Peterson called an all-hands meeting. We were losing the Brennan Industries contract, $8.2 million in annual business walking out the door if we couldn't prove 15% cost reduction by December. That's real money for a mid-size operation like ours, enough to mean layoffs for about 140 of our 480 employees. Peterson assigned the efficiency project to me. Made sense. I knew every machine on that floor, every process bottleneck, every safety protocol that kept our people going home with all their fingers attached. I spent weekends mapping material flows, timing changeovers, talking to operators who'd been running these lines since Bush was in office. The first Bush. I found 11 major bottlenecks and designed an optimization sequence that would boost output 22% while actually improving our safety metrics. The key was staged implementation. You don't just flip switches and hope for the best. You test modifications gradually, monitor results, adjust parameters based on real data. I'd built in safety margins for everything: thermal loads, mechanical stress, material flow rates. My original plan would save us $720,000 annually. Not spectacular, but solid, sustainable, and safe. Then Trevor showed up. Bill, I've reviewed your efficiency proposal, he said during our first meeting, spreading my documents across the conference table like he was dealing cards. Good foundation work, but I think we can be more ambitious. More ambitious how? Your projections are conservative. 22% efficiency. Gain? I'm thinking we can hit 35%, maybe 40%. Trevor, these numbers are based on actual equipment capabilities. You can't just wish machines to run faster than they're designed for. Bill, that's old thinking. Disruptive innovation means challenging assumptions. I should have known right then. When someone starts talking about disrupting manufacturing equipment that can crush a car, you're dealing with someone who's never seen what happens when 50 tons of steel decides to have a bad day. Trevor spent the next 2 weeks collaborating with me, which meant I explained how things actually worked while he took notes and asked questions like, what if we eliminated this safety step? And do we really need these thermal monitors? I tried to educate him. Showed him the scars on Rodriguez's hand from the last time someone bypassed a safety interlock. Walked him through the incident reports from our sister plant in Ohio, where they'd tried to run equipment outside manufacturer specs. 3 weeks of downtime and $400,000 in repairs. Bill, I appreciate the history lesson, but we can't let fear of failure prevent progress. Fear of failure. This kid thought avoiding industrial accidents was fear of failure. The night before my scheduled presentation to the board, I stayed late to finalize everything. Triple-checked every calculation, verified every safety margin, made sure the implementation timeline was realistic. I embedded tracking signatures in my Excel formulas, little breadcrumbs that would prove authorship if anyone tried to claim credit. Old habit from the core. Always leave evidence when you're operating in hostile territory. I uploaded the final version to our shared drive at 10:47 p.m. Efficiency Project WA Final.xlsx. Clean, comprehensive, and guaranteed not to kill anyone. Next morning, I got in at 6:30 like always. Checked email, grabbed coffee that tasted like it was brewed during the previous administration, and headed to the conference room for my 8 a.m. presentation. Trevor was already there. "Morning, Bill. Hope you don't mind." I took the liberty of polishing up the presentation, made it a little more dynamic for the executive audience. He clicked open his laptop. My project was there, but it wasn't my project anymore. Gone were the staged implementation phases. Gone were the thermal safety margins. Gone were the equipment stress limits I'd carefully calculated based on manufacturer specifications. In their place were operating parameters that would turn our production line into a very expensive way to create scrap metal and ambulance runs. "Trevor, these modifications will cause equipment failure." "Bill, you're being overly cautious. I've run the numbers." "What numbers?" "These speeds exceed bearing capabilities. These temperatures will cause material degradation. And where are the safety interlocks?" "Safety interlocks slow down production. We're removing inefficiencies." Peterson walked in before I could respond, followed by Richard, Hudson, and Jennifer Taylor from legal. The presentation was starting. Trevor launched into his pitch like he was selling miracle weight loss pills. Our efficiency initiative leverages operational optimization to achieve unprecedented productivity gains. I sat in the back watching him promise a 38% increase in output while eliminating every safety measure that kept our people alive. His projected savings had grown from my realistic $720,000 to an impossible $1.6 million annually. "When can we begin implementation?" Peterson asked. "I'm targeting line 3 for pilot testing next Monday," Trevor said, clicking to a slide that showed my equipment layout with his dangerous modifications highlighted in cheerful green. That's when I made my decision. Trevor wanted to play with people's lives to impress Daddy and advance his career. Fine, but he was going to do it with an audience that understood exactly what he was proposing. "Mr. Peterson," I said, standing slowly, "before we proceed, I'd like to request a safety review of these modifications." Trevor's smile flickered. "Bill, I've already had these reviewed. Everything's been approved." Lie number 1. I knew because I'd written the original safety protocols myself. "Great," I said. "I'll just need to see that documentation for our files." "I'll get you that paperwork this afternoon," Trevor said quickly. "Perfect. And I assume we'll want OSHA to sign off before we modify any safety equipment?" The room went quiet. Peterson's eyes sharpened. "OSHA?" Peterson asked. "Yes, sir. Trevor's plan removes thermal cutoffs and safety interlocks from our heavy machinery. Federal regulations require OSHA approval for modifications to mandated safety equipment." Trevor's face went white. "Bill, I think you're misunderstanding the scope of the modifications." "Am I?" "Because according to this slide, we're eliminating temperature monitoring on equipment that operates at 400 degrees. That's a violation of OSHA Section 1910(2)12. Peterson looked at Trevor, then at me, then back at Trevor. "Is this accurate?" Trevor stammered. "The modifications are within acceptable operational parameters." "According to whom?" Jennifer Taylor asked, her lawyer instincts kicking in. That's when I knew Trevor had just walked into the trap I'd been building since the moment he decided my safety margins were optional. "I think," I said quietly, "we should postpone implementation until we can get proper regulatory approval." Peterson nodded slowly. "Agreed. Trevor, get with Bill and legal to ensure full compliance before we proceed." After the meeting, Trevor cornered me by the elevator. "Bill, what the hell was that about?" "That was about making sure our people go home with the same number of limbs they came to work with. You're sabotaging this project." "No, Trevor, I'm trying to save you from sabotaging yourself and taking our workers down with you." But Trevor wasn't listening. He was already planning his next move. He just didn't know I was 3 steps ahead of him. The silence after Machine 7 died was deafening. Just the hiss of hydraulic fluid leaking onto the concrete floor and the smell of burned, bearing grease hanging in the air like industrial incense. Trevor stood there staring at the smoking wreckage of his efficiency initiative, his face cycling through confusion, panic, and the dawning realization that MBA theories don't override the laws of physics. What happened?" he asked. "Catastrophic bearing failure," I said, making a final note in my book. "Exactly what happens when you run equipment at 40% above design specifications with no thermal protection." Peterson came down from his office at a pace I'd never seen from him before. Richard Hudson was right behind him, followed by Jennifer Taylor carrying a legal pad and the expression of someone who smelled lawsuits brewing. What's the situation? Peterson asked, surveying the mess. Machine 7's bearing assembly seized, I reported. Bearing temperature reached 215 degrees before failure. Line 3 is down pending damage assessment. Peterson turned to Trevor. I thought you said this had been safety tested. Trevor's mouth opened and closed like a fish trying to breathe air. The calculations showed it should have been fine. What calculations? Jennifer asked, pen ready. I ran analysis on the operational parameters. The efficiency gains justified the increased thermal loads. I pulled out my camera and started showing Peterson the pictures I'd taken. These are the modifications Trevor implemented without engineering approval. Thermal alarms disabled, automatic shutoffs bypassed, belt speed increased 33% above normal operations. Peterson studied each photo, his expression getting darker. Trevor, did you have these changes reviewed by our safety engineer? Bill said he would look at them. I said I'd look at them, I corrected. I never said I approved them. In fact, I specifically recommended waiting for OSHA clearance. Richard Hudson stepped forward, trying to protect his nephew. Surely this is just a minor setback. Equipment failures happen. Uncle Rick, this wasn't a random failure, I said, opening my notebook. This was predictable. Bearing grease breaks down at 200 degrees. Trevor's parameters guaranteed we'd hit that temperature within 90 minutes of startup. I walked them through my documentation. Timeline of events, temperature readings, equipment specifications, manufacturer warnings. Everything Trevor had ignored in his rush to impress the board. How long will repairs take? Peterson asked. Martinez had been crawling around under the machine with a flashlight. Mr. Peterson, it's not just the bearing. The seizure damaged the drive shaft, cracked the housing, and we've got hydraulic leaks throughout the system. I'd estimate 2 weeks minimum, maybe 3. Cost? Parts alone will be $180,000. That's if we can get them. This equipment's 25 years old. Some components might need custom manufacturing. Peterson did the math in his head. 3 weeks of downtime on our primary production line, $180,000 in parts, labor costs, missed delivery schedules. Trevor's efficiency improvement had just cost us more than my entire annual salary. Trevor, Peterson said quietly, my office. Now. After they left, Richard Hudson lingered on the plant floor, staring at the damaged machine like it held answers to questions he was afraid to ask. Bill, how long have you known this would happen? Since the moment I saw Trevor's modifications. Bearing failure at these parameters wasn't a possibility, it was a certainty. Why didn't you stop him? I tried. He went around me, claimed he had authority to implement changes without engineering approval. He told the supervisors that I'd signed off on everything. Hudson rubbed his forehead. He said you were supportive of the project. I was supportive of my original project. The safe version that would have saved us $720,000 annually without risking anyone's life. $720,000. Richard, my plan was conservative because it was sustainable. Trevor's plan promised bigger numbers because he didn't understand the constraints. It's like promising to drive from here to Chicago in 2 hours. Sounds impressive until you consider physics. Hudson stared at the puddle of hydraulic fluid spreading across the floor. Bill, I need to ask you something directly. Did you document this failure intentionally? I looked at him for a long moment. Richard, I documented this failure because that's what you do when someone's about to implement dangerous modifications to industrial equipment. The question isn't why I documented it. The question is why Trevor implemented it without proper review. But you knew he would fail. I knew his plan violated basic engineering principles. I didn't know when it would fail, just that it would. The only question was whether people would get hurt when it happened. That evening, I got a call at home from Peterson's assistant. Mr. Anderson, could you come in early tomorrow? Mr. Peterson would like to review some documents with you. I arrived at 6:30 a.m. to find Peterson, Jennifer Taylor, and Dave Richardson from OSHA waiting in the conference room. Dave had driven down from Indianapolis overnight after I'd called him with the details. Bill, Peterson said, Dave's been explaining OSHA's position on yesterday's incident. Dave nodded. Bill, based on your documentation and the evidence at the scene, this represents multiple willful violations of federal safety standards. Disabled safety equipment, operations outside manufacturer specifications, implementation without proper engineering review. What does that mean for the company? Peterson asked. Normally, we'd be looking at $75,000 in fines per violation. But given that no one was injured and corrective action was taken immediately, we're recommending a written citation and mandatory safety training. Peterson looked relieved, but Dave wasn't finished. However, the individual who authorized these modifications could face personal liability. If someone had been injured, we'd be talking about criminal charges. "Where's Trevor now?" I asked. "Gone," Peterson said simply. "Resigned effective immediately." Richard submitted his resignation this morning as well. I felt something settle in my chest. Not satisfaction exactly, more like the feeling you get when a long-held breath finally releases. "Bill," Peterson continued, "the board met an emergency session last night. We're implementing your original efficiency plan immediately, the safe version." "Good. We're also creating a new position, Director of Plant Operations, someone who can ensure this kind of thing never happens again." "Interested?" Director of Plant Operations. A $15,000 raise, my own budget, and direct authority over all production modifications. Most importantly, the power to ensure that safety always came first. "Yes, sir. I'm interested." "Good. Your first job is implementing your efficiency plan and rebuilding trust with our workforce. Some of the guys are pretty shaken up by yesterday." That afternoon, I walked the plant floor talking to operators, supervisors, maintenance crew. Everyone had the same question. How could someone smart enough to get an MBA be stupid enough to disable safety equipment? "Experience," I told them. "You can't learn industrial common sense from a textbook. It comes from years of seeing what works, what doesn't, and what sends people to the hospital." Martinez pulled me aside by line 3, which was still draped in caution tape like a crime scene. "Bill, word is you documented everything Trevor did. You knew this would happen. I knew his plan was dangerous. I didn't know exactly how it would fail. But you let him do it anyway. Tony, if I'd tried to stop him directly, he would have claimed I was undermining management." Peterson might have sided with Richard's nephew over a floor supervisor. This way, the evidence spoke for itself. Martinez nodded slowly. Cold, but smart. Sometimes you have to be cold to keep people safe. 3 months later, my efficiency plan was exceeding projections. We'd hit 24% improvement in output while actually reducing our injury rate. The Brennan Industries contract was renewed for 4 years instead of the usual 2. We'd hired back 50 of the workers who were scheduled for layoffs. Trevor's failure had cost us $240,000 in repairs and lost production, but it had also saved us from something much worse. An OSHA investigation revealed that his modifications would have caused at least 3 more equipment failures within 6 months, and probably resulted in serious injuries. Sometimes revenge isn't about destroying your enemy. Sometimes it's about giving them enough rope to hang themselves while making sure innocent people don't get caught in the noose. My daughter Sarah called from college after hearing about my promotion. "Dad, I heard you're running the whole plant operation now, just the production side, but yeah, it's a big step up." Mom said Trevor guy nearly got people killed. Trevor was young and overconfident. He thought he understood things he'd never actually experienced. "So you let him learn the hard way?" Sarah, sometimes the only way to teach someone about consequences is to let them face consequences. The important thing is making sure those consequences fall on the right person. That's very Machiavellian of you, Dad. That's very Marine of me, kiddo. Protect your people, complete the mission, and never let someone else's stupidity become your emergency. 6 months later, I heard Trevor had taken a job with a consulting firm in Atlanta, probably advising other companies on efficiency improvements he'd never actually tested. Some people never learn. But at least now they're someone else's problem. And at Midwest Manufacturing, the alarms work exactly the way they're supposed to. 1 year later, I'm standing in the same conference room where Trevor had pitched his efficiency disaster, but this time, I'm the one with the presentation clicker. The quarterly board meeting always felt like theater, but today felt different. Charles Peterson sat at the head of the table, flanked by board members who actually understood that sustainable profits come from sustainable operations, not from cutting corners on safety. As you can see from slide 12, I said, clicking to the production metrics, we've maintained 23% efficiency improvement for 8 consecutive months. 0 safety incidents, 0 equipment failures related to operational modifications. Board member Patricia Williams nodded approvingly. Bill, these numbers are impressive. How do they compare to industry benchmarks? We're running 18% above industry average for plants our size. More importantly, our insurance premiums dropped 12% this year due to our safety record. The real victory wasn't just the numbers. It was watching veteran operators like Martinez take pride in their work again. It was seeing new hires get proper safety training instead of being rushed onto the floor. It was knowing that when people clocked out at the end of their shift, they were going home to their families intact. After the meeting, Peterson asked me to stay behind. "Bill, I got an interesting call yesterday. Brennan Industries wants to expand their contract with us. They're looking at an additional $4.2 million in annual business. That's significant growth." It is. But they have one requirement. They want assurance that our operations are being managed by someone with proven experience in both efficiency and safety. Makes sense. After what happened with Trevor, reputation matters. Peterson smiled. They specifically asked for you to oversee their production lines. Seems word has gotten around the industry about what happened here. I thought about that. Trevor's failure had become a cautionary tale, passed around at manufacturing conferences and safety seminars, the MBA who thought he could outsmart physics, the efficiency expert who created the most expensive equipment failure in company history. Peterson, can I ask you something? Shoot. When you assigned that original efficiency project to me, did you know Richard would try to insert Trevor into it? Peterson was quiet for a moment. I suspected Richard might want to give his nephew some visibility. I didn't expect him to completely hijack your work, but you let it play out. Bill, you've been with this company for 21 years. You've never given me a reason to doubt your judgment. When you raised safety concerns, I listened. When you documented everything, I paid attention. I figured if Trevor was as smart as his MBA suggested, he'd listen to you. If he wasn't. Peterson shrugged. Well, better to find out during a pilot test than during full implementation. So Peterson had been watching too, running his own kind of test, letting Trevor prove himself one way or another. The board's approved a new position, Peterson continued, VP of Operations. Interested? VP of Operations. The job Richard Hudson had held, the job Trevor thought he was destined for. The job that would put me in charge of all plant operations, safety protocols, and efficiency improvements across the company. What happened to waiting for the right external candidate? The right candidate was already here. Just took us a while to recognize it. That evening, I drove home past the plant one more time. Second shift was running smoothly, all the safety lights green, all the thermal alarms functioning exactly as designed. Line 3 was humming along at our optimized parameters fast enough to meet production targets, safe enough that I could sleep at night. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah at Northwestern. She was graduating next month with her industrial engineering degree and had already accepted a job with a manufacturing company in Michigan. Dad, heard about your promotion. VP of Operations. Mom says you're practically running the whole company now. Not quite, kiddo, but it's a big step up. Think I could get a summer internship there before I start my real job. Sarah, you've already learned more about manufacturing safety from dinner table conversations than some people learn in business school. But if you want to see how things really work, you're welcome anytime. Cool. Maybe I can help design some new efficiency improvements. Just promise me you'll read the safety manuals first. Dad, I'm your daughter. Of course I'll read the safety manuals. Multiple times. That's what I was proudest of. Not the promotion, not the salary increase, not even the satisfaction of watching Trevor fail spectacularly. I was proud that my daughter understood that real engineering meant respecting the constraints, not ignoring them. 2 weeks later, I got an unexpected email. The sender was Trevor Hudson, writing from his consulting firm in Atlanta. Bill, I know this might seem strange, but I wanted to reach out. I've been doing a lot of thinking about what happened at Midwest Manufacturing, and I realize I owe you an apology. I was arrogant and dismissed your concerns when I should have listened. I also want you to know that your documentation of the incident probably saved my career. When other companies ask about my experience, I can point to the lessons learned and show that I understand the importance of safety protocols now. I hope there are no hard feelings. I stared at that email for a long time. Part of me wanted to delete it without responding. Part of me wanted to write back and explain exactly how close he'd come to killing someone. But another part, the part that remembered being young and overconfident in the Marines before a grizzled sergeant taught me the difference between theory and reality, felt something that might have been sympathy. I wrote back, Trevor, no hard feelings. Just remember that in manufacturing, like in life, the constraints aren't there to limit you. They're there to keep you alive long enough to succeed." He never replied, but I hoped he understood. 6 months into my new role as VP, we were approached by a business school that wanted to do a case study on our efficiency improvements. The professor explained that they were particularly interested in the contrast between sustainable operational improvements and the failure of aggressive efficiency initiatives. "We'd like to interview both you and Trevor Hudson," she said. "Get both perspectives on what happened." What's Trevor's perspective? He attributes the failure to insufficient preparation time and inadequate understanding of legacy equipment limitations. He's developed a consulting methodology focused on gradual implementation and stakeholder buy-in. I almost smiled. Trevor had learned something after all. Maybe getting his efficiency plan destroyed by basic physics had taught him more than 4 years of business school. "Professor, I'll participate in your case study on one condition." "What's that?" "You include the maintenance records, the equipment specifications, and the actual timeline of the bearing failure. Not just the management theory, but the engineering reality." "Absolutely. That's exactly what we want to document." 3 years later, I'm still VP of Operations at Midwest Manufacturing. We've expanded to 2 additional plants, hired 127 new employees, and maintained our safety record. The efficiency improvements we implemented have saved the company $2.3 million annually, more than Trevor ever promised, achieved through methods he never understood. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd stopped Trevor before he could implement his dangerous modifications. Would he have learned from the experience? Would he have become a better manager? Or would he have just found another way to endanger people while advancing his career? I'll never know for sure, but I know that 480 people go to work every day in a plant where safety isn't optional, where experience is valued over education, and where the alarms work exactly the way they're supposed to. Martinez, now a shift supervisor himself, stopped by my office last week with a question about training procedures for new hires. "Bill, these college kids coming in, they're smart, but they don't understand why we do things the way we do. What do you tell them?" "Same thing you told me when I started. The safety protocols aren't suggestions. They're lessons written in other people's blood." "Good answer. Speaking of lessons, whatever happened to that Trevor guy? Last I heard, he's running a successful consulting practice, specializes in gradual operational improvements and stakeholder engagement. Think he learned anything from what happened here?" "I think he learned that physics doesn't care about your MBA. Sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying your enemy. Sometimes it's teaching them to be better than they were. Sometimes it's proving that competence beats credentials, that experience beats ambition, and that the slow, careful way of doing things is usually the right way. And sometimes, if you're really lucky, you get to spend your career making sure that the next generation understands the difference between efficiency and safety, between innovation and recklessness, between confidence and competence. The machines still hum on the plant floor below my office window. The thermal alarms still work. The safety protocols are still followed. And every day people go home to their families with the same number of fingers they came to work with. That's not revenge. That's victory. Thanks for sticking with Bill's story from senior operator to VP of operations. If you enjoyed this tale of workplace justice and industrial common sense, remember that sometimes the best way to deal with dangerous incompetence is to document everything and let physics do the teaching. Hit that subscribe button for more stories where experience trumps education and safety always comes first.